And welcome to this year's rendition of Euro EEDUppsala Uppsala 2016. And I never thought I would hear these numbers and words put together. And I have to thank Gerd Müller here for a slightly drunken evening in Venice a few years ago when he persuaded me that it would be a good idea to hold this conference in Uppsala. I'm not sure yet that he was right, but I hope by the end of this week he will be. So a very warm welcome to you all here. In case you don't know what Uppsala looks like, it's something like this. This is not in the middle of a thunderstorm, which many of you unfortunately experienced this evening, but in the sunnier days, you can see the cathedral and the old mill here. It's a very attractive town, especially in the summer, and I hope you have time to wander around and experience some of its charms in the very nice, long Swedish evenings. Unfortunately, you've missed the star attraction for this year unless you're spending an extra week, because we have Tom Jones coming to give a concert next week. Tragically, it's a week too late for most of you, but it's probably not too late to change your flights if you're really desperate for it. Just a little bit about Uppsala. Uppsala University was founded in 1477, and it's the oldest in Scandinavia. It had some pretty rough times after the Reformation, but it was slowly sort of got going again in the 17th century. And the modern day university has about 24,000 students. It's quite big, has an enormous range of different disciplines, and especially I think it's fair to say it has a very rich tradition in evolutionary biology, and as you will see, I hope, in some of the presentations in this conference. This ranges from studies of the various earliest origins of life right up to domestication and beyond, so almost the full range of possible evolutionary biology topics. It's a real center for the study of this topic. So although Uppsala perhaps is not world famous for its EEDUppsala research per se, although there is some very interesting work going on here, I hope, its broader evolutionary background, I think, is very strong and very interesting. Well, of course, it would be hardly possible to have a biology conference in Uppsala without mentioning some of the famous predecessors, both of which are botanists, in fact. This is Linnaeus on the left, dressed up in the costume of the Lapps, as they would have been called then, the Sami. I think one of these portraits is in his townhouse here, and he was very proud of his trip up to the north of Sweden. But allegedly, they dressed him up in the clothes of a woman. He didn't realize this, I don't think, but they wanted to make fun of him, like showing off his ethnic sensitivities. And to the right is his predecessor, Olof Rudbeck. There were two Rudbecks here, both of which were famous botanists, and also, like Linnaeus, had very, very wide-ranging scientific and non-scientific interests. They're bordering on the crazy, I would say. Yeah, very, very interesting character. And I think both of these characters are quite important, considering the breadth of subjects covered in EEDUppsala, as you'll see from the talks and presentations here. Well, a few years ago, there's been some discussion, of course, by people like Gordon Love and Rudy Raff about the intellectual pedigree or origins, so to speak, of EEDUppsala and how it emerged from various disciplines in the 19th century, the so-called developmental mechanics of people like Wilhelm Rode, and also the comparative embryology of people like Ernst Haeckel. And somehow through, as you can see, a rather complicated pathway, these disciplines sort of got tangled up with each other to end up with a still rather uneasy relationship today, and it's today this mixed, rather uneasy dialectic, so to speak, between these two different branches, which define the modern day subject insofar as one can define it. And this has been worked on in particular for the very interesting example of Uppsala itself. This is a picture of my old friend and colleague, Lennart Olsson. That's because I couldn't find a picture of Gösta Jägersten, so you get Lennart instead, which is much better, of course. So remarkably, in the same building for many years, were two people who really exemplified these two very different approaches to EEDUppsala. Gösta Jägersten on the one hand, who was the comparative embryologist, very much in the pioneering idealism, so to speak, of Haeckel, and on the other hand, the very careful experimental manipulations of Herstadius, who, together with Spearman, really established some of the most important principles of how development actually works. And if you want to read the paper about this, I recommend Leonard's paper in 2007 in Theory in Biosciences, which this is drawn. Well, you can see the difference. So on the left, you have the rather, entirely speculative evolution of the bilaterogastria, which was meant to explain the diversity of animal life today based on evolution of embryos. And on the right, we have the careful results of the exportation experiments and so on of Herstadius on sea urchins. And as is well known in Uppsala, and as Leonard rather coyly points out in his paper, these two characters, although they had to inhabit the same building, didn't really get on very well with each other. In fact, they refused to speak to each other and had to correspond via their secretaries and in the time-honored tradition. And of course, you'll also notice that they both lived to an enormous age. And the rumor is that they were trying to, the urge to outlive the other one sort of kept them both alive for decades and decades and decades of bitterness. So they were both alive when I first came to Uppsala. It's remarkable. Anyway, I hope that at least we don't have that bitterness in the conference today, but I hope we will see this very fruitful interaction between these uneasy partners that make up EEDU today. And so at least I think there's a very appropriate background for bringing this conference to Uppsala. There's a couple of practical details I want to talk about. The Wi-Fi, if you haven't spotted it already, there are signs around, and it's in the program, is the UKK is the network, and the password is Uppsala 1. This is aimed especially at the chairs and also for speakers. Symposia talks are 25 minutes long, and the contributor sessions are 15 minutes long, and these include question times. You'll see that we have a very full program indeed, so it's please essential not to overrun the sessions, because we have 4 parallel sessions and some kind of chaos will ensue. And in particular, remember that you'll need time to switch over presenters as well. So please bear in mind that and try really hard to keep on time. I know you can do it. Inevitably, there have been a couple of last-minute changes to the program, which missed even the erratum, and they are listed here. There's a wrong authorship on P20 and a changed poster for poster 160. So please make a note of that, at least in your minds. There is, of course, an erratum and corrigendum in your conference packs, which details some other changes to the program. And the full program and abstract are on your USB sticks, which most of you should have around your necks as we speak. Social media, the official hashtag for Twitter, if you want to Twitter, is hashtag EEDUppsala, and many people have already been enthusiastically promoting their own work and posters and their experience in Uppsala. Please feel free to do this. I think the general policy we will adopt for this conference is opt out for talks and opt in for posters. In other words, if you don't want people to tweet your talks, you should say, but if you do want people to speak, if you do want people to tweet your posters, you should say as well. So opt out for talks, opt in for posters. We have a Facebook page, EEDU Uppsala 2016. Please feel free to use both of these to spread your science around the world and to your friends and colleagues who tragically can't be here. Of course, for such a large and complex meeting, there was a great deal of work and planning involved, and of course I'd like to thank the EED committee members for, especially the program committee, for a tremendous amount of work which they did for putting the program together, and of course all the other program committee members as well. And here in Uppsala, I'd like to particularly thank Sebastian Willman and Michael Streng in Earth Sciences, our colleagues Dominic Wright and Carlos Guerrero Bosagna down in Linköping. Here in UKK, our contact who's been very helpful is Anna Lundin. And then the people who've been the engine for all the work in many ways are Lena, Annika, and Caroline for the Academy conference arrangers. And finally, the guys and ladies in yellow, where are they? They're up here. These people, their names are listed: William, Aidan, Jasper, Johan, Miriam, Sarah, Rolf, Tom, and Alberto. They will be assisting you, I hope, during the talks and the sessions. I would also like to single out and thank Tom Owen in particular for doing some incredibly boring work, which took many hours. So many thanks for your help already, and thank you in advance for the assistance you'll have for the smooth running, I hope, of this conference. Finally, I'll leave you with a picture of our various sponsors and funders and exhibitors. And the exhibitors are up with the posters on the 6th floor. So welcome once more to Uppsala, and I very much hope you enjoy this meeting. Thank you.
I'd like to extend a cordial welcome also on behalf of the Executive Committee of the EED Society. And I'm glad that I was able, with only a few beers, to convince Graham to do this. And I'm also very happy to see so many familiar faces back here at the EED meeting after the Vienna meeting and the other meetings before. This, in fact, is the 6th EED conference. And so since the society was founded in 2006, this is also its 10th anniversary. And I think this is a wonderful achievement for a new society to keep going and have such regular meetings. And it's on a great part thanks to Fritzen, who was the engine behind founding the society. And I think it's really very rewarding to see that it continues to grow. We're very pleased to again have a very broad program in the posters, in the talks, in the symposia and keynotes, touching topics, and actually we tried to balance out many of the topics in EvoDevo, such as animal and plant EvoDevo, and empirical and theoretical work, and molecular and organismal work, trying to bring it together. But there is also this time, there is contributions from paleontology, from life history theory, from reproductive medicine, from even history and philosophy of science. And I'm very pleased about this, because this is really what the society is all about. It's about providing an integrative platform for all these different approaches to EvoDevo, and truly enable us to forge a unity of what has been up on the screen a minute ago between evolutionary biology and developmental biology, or evolutionary theory and developmental theory. So I'm very grateful for Graham and his team to have organized this. We'd also like to thank the University of Uppsala and the conference management team, which has been wonderful. And we'd like to thank the sponsors. And we would like to thank all the committees who have worked at this, because, for example, sponsors, they don't just offer this, by themselves. They need to be approached, and so the various committees that have worked behind the scenes should be thanked very much. And I'd like to wish you a very exciting and rewarding conference and a gratifying stay in Uppsala. Thank you. Now it is my honor and my pleasure to introduce the first keynote speaker in the conference. I'd like to mention that also with the keynotes lectures, we try to balance out things. It's not an easy task. There is animal topics, there's plant topics, there's theory. We usually like to include a speaker from the local EvoDevo community. There's the gender balance and so on. But I believe we have managed again. And so today's speaker is, the local speaker is from the University of Uppsala. I believe you all know him. It's Per Ahlberg. He's a paleontologist, and he hardly needs any introduction, but I'll give a very brief introduction nevertheless, because that's the custom. Per received his PhD from the University of Cambridge. Then he went on to be a lecturer at Oxford University, continued in the Department of Paleontology at the Natural History Museum in London, and since 2003 is a professor of evolutionary organismal biology at the University of Uppsala. And his research interests, as you may know, are in the origin and evolution of vertebrates, in particular the evolution of vertebrate head patterning, neck patterning, and the middle ear. And he, in his work, is really integrating morphological, paleontological, and genetic approaches, working with transgenic animals. So he is truly an EvoDevo person, and we greatly look forward to his lecture. Per.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes, it's live. So thanks very much for that introduction. Well, to summarize it more briefly, I'm the warm-up act. So, and the first thing you're going to get to see is a changing of computers, which will hopefully work. Tried to run my animations on Graham's machine and they wouldn't run. So it's just not old enough. That's what you need. Now, let's see.